Today, we're looking at two aircraft that are not very well known outside certain aviation circles. The Bellanca Aircruiser, or the Airbus depending on what specific model you are looking at, and the even more obscure Bellanca Model 77-140 bomber. The development of the latter was directly related to the development of the former, hence why both are being included in this video. Also, I apologise if the technical details are a bit lacking for this particular video, but the sources on these planes are both scarce and sometimes conflicting, so I shall only discuss what I'm confident to be true. The Aircruiser can trace its origins back to 1928. In that year, Giuseppe Bellanca built the Bellanca Model K for Italian World War I ace Cesare Sibeli, who had commissioned the design of an aircraft that could fly non-stop from New York to Rome. Unfortunately for Sibeli, he ran out of money and the flight never took place. Bellanca's design survived, however, and he shifted his design focus towards the commercial market. This resulted in the P100 Airbus and its descendants, the first of which was built and completed in 1930. It was a unique design, both for its looks and its surprisingly high fuel efficiency. It was instantly recognizable due to its wing configuration. Built as a sesquiplane, the lower wing resembled an inverted gull, with a sharp anhedral on the inner sections, and the outer section was especially strange, as it performed the dual role of being a lifting surface as well as a support strut, tapering down to the point where it connected to the upper wing. This unique appearance earned Bellanca's aircraft the nickname of the Flying W in certain places, particularly in Canada. In 1931, the P100 demonstrated its efficiency by flying 4,400 miles in a single flight that lasted 35 hours. The test pilot, George Haldeman, had mixed opinions about its flight handling. Though it was not outright unstable, it did suffer from aileron drag, and the rudder felt especially heavy, which for long-distance flying was not ideal. However, other than that, the aircraft did perform well. The P100 did not secure any sales due to reliability concerns over its water-cooled Curtiss Conqueror engine. However, the P200 and the P300, powered by air-cooled radials, got a much better reception. Unfortunately, their development was poorly timed. Firstly, the Great Depression reduced the demand for air travel, because everyone was broke, which in turn reduced sales opportunities, and secondly, in 1934, a new regulation outlawed the use of single-engine transport aircraft by US airlines. Though their chance of commercial success in the United States was now all but gone, the Bellancas did see a brief stint of military use. In 1932, the US Army Air Corps purchased 4 Airbuses, and this was followed by the purchase of another 10 in 1933. These would be redesignated as the C-27, and all but one of them would eventually be upgraded as the C-27C, which was powered by a 750 horsepower Wright Cyclone. Capable of carrying a 3,000-pound payload, which was impressive for their size and weight, the C-27s would be used during the 1934 airmail crisis, much like the Douglas XB-7, which we covered in a previous video. The Aircruiser was an improved development of the Airbus. This was conceived before the aforementioned events that curtailed Bellanca's prospects in the United States. It was built as a more luxurious model of the Airbus, but it still maintained the same seating capacity of 12 to 14 passengers. The seats were covered in leather, there was good ventilation for both fresh air and heating, and large cabin windows offered excellent views for the passengers. Ironically, the Aircruiser, designed for luxury and comfort, would find its greatest success as a Canadian bush aircraft. With a more powerful engine than the Airbus, the Aircruiser boasted the ability to lift a payload greater than its own weight at a speed of up to 155 miles an hour. It could also take off in a shorter distance compared to other transports of similar size or weight carrying capacity. These two factors made the Aircruiser suitable for a specific niche in Canada, where a mining boom had created the need for a transport that could carry heavy loads across large distances, whilst also being able to take off from small, remote airfields. The most famous of the Canadian Bellancas was an example purchased by W. Lee Brintnell, who bought it to carry uranium concentrate from the El Dorado mine at Port Radium to Edmonton, and it was dubbed the El Dorado Radium Express. These flights involved supplying the mines on the inbound trip, and then flying out with up to 3,500 pounds of uranium concentrate, worth $20,000 back then, in woven cloth bags. Stan McMillan, who also flew the Aircruiser on this particular route, once said that the Aircruiser was one of the ugliest, most efficient aircraft for its period, and it would continue to fly this particular route for well over a decade. The failure of the Airbus to secure commercial success in the United States, combined with the praise of the C-27 and the Aircruisers, prompted Giuseppe Bellanca to develop a bomber version of the aircraft to offer to the US military, and this resulted in the Model 77-140. This new design featured several major changes compared to its predecessor. The most obvious change was the removal of the nose-mounted engine, which was replaced by a pair of 715 Wright Cyclones that were mounted on the upper wing. They were housed in nacelles that were fitted at the point where the support struts connected with the main wing spars. To both support the additional weight of the engines and also maintain the required lift, the upper wing was both strengthened and had its span increased from 65 feet to 77 feet. Like on the Aircruiser, the upper wing was constructed of two spars, but the ribs were more closely spaced together to improve load handling. The wing itself was entirely fabric covered, and despite looking like a fixed unit, the outer section, along with its lower counterpart, could be folded back for easier storage and transportation. The center section of the lower wing, which supported the landing gear, was built from a steel frame and clad in duraluminum paneling. The design and arrangement of the control surfaces, particularly on the tail, were modified so that control of the aircraft could be easily maintained under the power of just one engine. The addition of two auxiliary rudders on the tail unit is the biggest of these particular changes, and they allowed for single-engine flight without maneuvering the aircraft into awkward positions to maintain control. In terms of crew members, the few scraps of source information seem to wildly vary between as little as 2 to as many as 6. However, the stations on the aircraft, as well as the defensive armament, give some indication on what it should have been. There was, at the very least, a gunner in the nose, of which several photos make this glaringly obvious. On the prototype, this front turret was enclosed, but it was later changed to an open turret for all other models. Then you had the pilot, which was apparently necessary unless you wanted your plane to be a static display, so that makes 2. Then there was a bomb aimer's station, which was located to the right and just below the pilot's seat, so that's 3. And after the pilot's cockpit was the main cabin, which we'll get to shortly, and behind this was the rear gunner's station, so at the very least, you needed 4 crew members. Due to the aircraft's high payload capacity and good range, it was designed to fill a number of roles as needed. Firstly, as a bomber, it could carry over 2,800 pounds of bombs and ammunition. The bomb load itself could consist of a pair of 1,100-pound bombs, or a collection of smaller bombs ranging from 600 down to 100 pounds in various loadouts. Secondly, it could be operated as both a troop transport and an ambulance, courtesy of the large central cabin. It was particularly well suited to the role of an ambulance, and had it been used as such, it would have done well. In terms of capacity, it could easily carry 9 stretchers, plus all the relevant attending medical personnel and equipment. Loading the wounded onto the plane would have been made particularly easy, as there was a large door on the starboard side that was used for cargo loading. Thirdly, its range and good fuel efficiency meant that it could be operated as a reconnaissance plane, and indeed this was particularly emphasized to the US Navy, as the aircraft was also being designed as a float plane. In 1934, its 1,500-mile range, the carrying capacity to carry a 300-pound payload, and a top speed of 175 miles an hour would have made it one of the best-performing aircraft in its class. But in the end, neither the Army Air Corps nor the US Navy were interested. Ultimately, the only customer to purchase Bellanca's bomber would be Columbia. The Colombian Air Force placed an order for 4 bombers to be modified as seaplanes, which were known as the Model 77-320. These aircraft entered service in 1935, operating mostly out of coastal air bases, and they would continue to do so until 1942, though none of them took part in any combat during the Second World War. No example of the bombers can be found today, but 2 examples of the aircruisers are known to exist. One of them is the last flying aircruiser, built in 1938, and it's on display at the Erickson Aircraft Collection in Oregon. The other is the famous plane from the El Dorado Radium Express. It crashed in northern Ontario in 1947, but it is now undergoing a restoration project with the Royal Aviation Museum of Western Canada, and hopefully we'll see it returned to its former glory sooner rather than later. As always, thank you all very much for watching, and a special thank you, of course, goes out to the patrons, with a special shout out to Deliardo, Kevin, Bane, FB, Christopher R, and Tronathon for their support as Wing Commander tier patrons. Thank you all so much, and I'll catch you all next time. Goodbye.